Hi there. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph, and I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here for another one of those battles. Is this the second one? I think this is the second one, yeah. Battle of the Masterpiece Albums. So basically what we're doing in this series, it's going to be 15 episodes initially, and then the semifinals and the finals, is I've decided to take my entire masterpiece collection, the ones I consider to be masterpieces, there's 61 in total, and put them into 15 battles of 4, except for the final one, which will have 5, and to see which one of these is actually my favorite. Because, as years go on, when you're just putting stuff into a masterpiece collection, or you're building your favorites for anything, what generally happens is that the ones who were in there initially get a lot of favor because they made your masterpieces early on. And this is the same with any sports or anything that you do. You have your favorites in a list, and that list kind of becomes stagnant because you don't really want to change anything for nostalgic reasons. And that's been the case with my masterpiece collection. So I've begun to wonder over the last year or so, are these albums still, well, I think they're all still masterpieces, but are they still in the order that I always put them in? Is this still my number one? Is this still my number two? Or have a significant amount of time and involvement with music changed that? So that's really what I'm just trying to do. I'm trying to keep myself honest, not just be nostalgic. It may turn out that my favorite album of all time is actually my favorite album of all time. But by doing it this way, it forces me to listen to them and really think about it. So that's the purpose for this, for me anyways. So I have 4 more today, of course. I'll give you each of them, and then I'll talk about each of them before I give you my rankings on them. So I've listened to all 4 this week. Usually I do it mostly last weekend on Sunday. I'll listen to 1 or 2, and then Monday or sometime throughout the week I put the other 2 in, and then I basically give them a ranking. So the 4 are this one, Neil Young's Freedom, released in 93, I believe, 93, yeah. The Who's Live at Leeds. Now this particular version of The Who's Live at Leeds, the original one, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, had just 8 tracks on it, and then there was another one that came out that had 12 tracks on it. This one actually has 14, so they've added a couple more. I think even some of the more modern versions of this have as many as 24 on it. But yeah, so Live at Leeds, one of my favorite live albums. So that is also one of the albums. Black Sabbath's Paranoid. As bad as the album cover is, the music doesn't suit the cover at all. This was early on, this was one of my first masterpieces. And then, of course, everybody knows that I love this album, Ace Frehley's solo album. I love the cover. I think it's a good rendition of Ace Frehley. And then you also have all of the great stuff that's on it. So those are the 4 albums that I'll be competing today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each of the albums a little bit, and then I'll give you my ranking. So we'll talk about this one first, since the pile is now reverted back upside down. So you've got Ace Frehley's solo. This was one of 4 solo albums. This isn't news to anybody, really. That came out on the same day, back in September of 1978. I believe it was September. I think it was September 18th. Might have been 28th, but I think it was 18th. Anyways, they released 4 solo albums, one by each member of the group. Initially, I liked them all fairly equally because I was a huge Kiss fan. But as time went on, this became my favorite, and then it's not even really close anymore. I do like Paul's album. I even like Gene's album too a bit. Not so much Peter's, but none of them are close to this album, in my opinion. So I made this a masterpiece album maybe a couple of decades ago, and never been disappointed. It's not an album that's ever really burned out on me either. It's always continued to stay. I think a large part of it is that I had a nice stereo system in my car, and I played that album all the time. It was one of the standard albums in my car, and so much so that this is not the original copy that I have. The other copy I have is the one, but the CD is gone because I think I left it in the car when I sold it. But anyways, yeah, some really great stuff on here. Stuff that's aged well with me. There are some tracks on here I don't care as much for. I don't think there's anything I dislike. There's a couple that kind of annoy me a bit. Of course, it starts out with "Rip It Out," which is, to me, the best Ace Frehley song ever sung and written. It's just ripping, no puns intended. The riff is great. The speed of the song is fantastic. It's heavy as hell. Definitely could have been on any of the Kiss albums and would have done well on them too. You got the next one, "Speeding Back to My Baby," is kind of, I kind of never really warmed to this song. I don't hate it in any way. There's just something about it that just doesn't sit with me well, and I've never really liked it that much. Next two songs, "Snowblind" and "Ozone," very kind of psychedelic, got that kind of acid rock sound to them a little bit. I love both of these tracks. I've only liked them more as time has gone on. Probably the next two favorite tracks on the album. Then you got "What's on Your Mind," which I absolutely loved when I first heard it. I still love it, but I don't love it as much. It's faded a bit over time. "New York Groove" it's a good song. For the radio, I guess it suits this situation very well. It's never been one of my favorites on the album. I do like Ace's sound on it, though, and I think the clapping part or the upbeat drum part to it is kind of interesting as well. Then you got I'm in Need of Love. This one goes in with "Ozone" and "Snowblind." Very kind of got that kind of psychedelic, spacey feel to it. Yeah, great song. "Wiped Out," I think it's a little bit of takeout on that "Wipeout" that came out in the 1950s. It's different. It doesn't sound like that, but it has the drum part and it's kind of quirky. This one actually has vocals though, so fantastic song. "Wiped Out." "Fractured Mirror," maybe the most underrated track on this album. Very haunting, very emotional song, I think, even though there's no words to it. I just think it's just one of his best released song, one of my favorites. So there's about 6 or 7 tracks on here I love. So that's why this album is a masterpiece for me. The next one up, Black Sabbath's "Paranoid." Fantastic album. Cover aside, which is kind of it's kind of stupid, to be honest. I don't get the point. It's a guy with looks like a bike helmet and a plastic sword in whatever kind of outfit that is, yellow and red outfit with a silly looking shield. I don't get it. But anyways, that aside, album is great. Starts out with "War Pigs" and "Luke's Wall," often just referred to as "War Pigs." Fantastic vocal performance by Ozzy. The music is malicious, feels very warlike, actually. I've seen the video. It's really perfect for the song. Excellent kind of feel to it. I love the drums on this. I think Iommi's guitar sound is fantastic. You got "Paranoid," which is next. Of course, it's the hit, their biggest hit probably. I did like it a lot early on because it was the first Sabbath song that kind of heard before I just got "Heaven and Hell." I did like it, but it's been overplayed to the point that I just don't want to hear it anymore. Next track, "Planet Caravan." This was a song I didn't really much like. Very acidy, very psychedelic, and didn't like it at first. Now it's one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a weird song, but really good. Next is "Iron Man." We all know that from the movie Iron Man, but very heavy song, very heavy vocal part. The guitar riffing is legendary on this particular track. Again, a little bit too much overplay for me. I don't really care for that part as much as I used to. So that's the side one. Side one is among the best rock album sides I've heard. Side two, I like it a lot. It's really good. I don't think it's in the top echelon of sides of albums, but it's still really good. It starts out with "Electric Funeral," which was another kind of quirky song I didn't really like much back then. very acidy, very kind of psychedelic, very anti-war, of course. The whole album is kind of anti-war. Electric Funeral is the track, really different. Then you've got the final three tracks. So you've got Hand and Doom and Jack the Stripper. Excellent kind of riffing. Guitar riffing is fantastic. The vocal performance by Ozzy, really good. Very clear, which is difficult to understand because Ozzy often can't speak where you can understand him. But the words on this are fantastic. More drug-induced songs, I guess you might want to call them, or stoner songs, but really good nevertheless. The Rat Salad is the only track on here I kind of don't like, which is kind of weird because I think this is one of Bill Ward's better drum albums. Of all of their albums, I think this is probably his best. And I don't really care, though, for the Rat Salad, the drum solo performance. It just doesn't do anything for me. I just assumed they had another track. So it's the one track on here I've never really cared much for. Okay, next up, The Who, Live at Leeds. I'm just going to do everything that's on this particular album because it's the one I've been listening to for 20 years, even though I know this is not the original layout. I think all the original songs are still on here. It's just they've added other songs, which hasn't hurt the album at all. Heaven and Hell, Nice Start. That's a really killer track. I believe this is written by at least John Entwistle. John Entwistle wrote this. I think he actually sings it too. Somebody will correct me on that, but I think he does. Great tune. Can't Explain, one of my favorite early Who songs. Definitely killer here. The Fortune Teller, interesting kind of track, I think. Tattoo, that's a deep album. That's a deep cut album. I do like this track a lot too. Young Man Blues, the one track, it doesn't really do much for me. Substitute, another legendary early on Who song. I love this track. I love it on all the stuff that I've ever heard it on. It's just fantastic. Happy Jack, probably one of my favorite Who tracks altogether. I've always liked that bass tone at the top of the song. I'm a Boy, definitely one of my favorite underappreciated, not as well known songs, but fantastic. A quick one, While He's Away. This is of course, take a mini kind of opera, I guess. The storyline's a little bit quirky, but it's a good track. Kind of funny, actually. I think it adds a little bit of humor to the album. And then the rest of the tracks, all great. Of course, you've got Summertime Blues and Shakin' All Over, tracks that they covered that were both absolute killers. The guitar and the smashing, and you just see the energy coming out in these two tracks. And then it finishes off with My Generation and Magic Bus, which are two of the most iconic and classic Who songs done live. Fantastic. What the hell is this? Money. I was wondering what that was rattling around in there. And then we're getting to the final album here, Freedom by Neil Young. This is kind of the album that brought me back to Neil Young. I'd been a bit of a Neil Young fan in the 80s and then kind of slipped away from it a bit. And then I bought this one day when I was out, when it was on, because it was newly out there. And I had heard the heavy cover of Rocky and the Free World, like the heavy version, which I absolutely loved. And then bought this album thinking there'd be more of that. And there actually wasn't. There was a lot of more acoustic stuff on here, which he's known for. So he's got two styles, heavy stuff, and then this real acoustic stuff. So there are two versions of that song on this album. I like both of them. Rockin' in the Free World, the opening one, is the acoustic version, pretty damn good. Actually, I think it might be the other way around. I can't remember though. Rockin' in the Free World, the second version at the back is much heavier, really strong. And then you've got a bunch of really good stuff in the middle. So you got Crime in the City. This is kind of a quirky story. It's hard to follow. You got to kind of listen to it a lot, and really, and this is one of those songs that just drags me in lyrically that I want to hear. Don't cry, my sweet girl. Nothing you say is written in stone. Yeah, love this song. Probably one of my favorites on the album. Hanging on a Limb. You take it. Eldorado's a good one. The Way of Love. Very kind of a reminiscent type song. Something, a reflective type song. I do like it. Someday. On Broadway, he covers a version. It's a bit of a cover. Wrecking Ball, another great tune. No More. Too Far Gone. Yeah, all these songs really good, solid. None of them are big known songs by him, but all of them contribute a solid, deep cut feel to this album, which is one of the reasons why I made it a masterpiece. I listened to it a lot when I first got it back in the early 90s. It was often in my car. I often put it on as soon as I got home. If when I first got it, I had it in the house all the time, and then I took it in the car for a while too. So excellent album. So that's it. That's the 4 albums. Now I got to give you my ranking, and then a little bit about why I rank them that way. So I think this one's going to be number 4. It's a good album. Hasn't held up as well as some of the other albums, but still a good one. I don't go to it as much because I actually like a couple of other Neil Young albums that are newer to me, haven't been put in the masterpiece, but I like listening to them more. But anyways, I do like that. It came in 4th though, easily. It wasn't really challenging the other 3. Next out is this one, Live at Leeds. I love this album, but I played it so much at one time that it just burned out a bit. It really hasn't made a comeback. I mean, some of the tracks have done well, and I did enjoy listening to it the other day, but just hasn't. It suffered too much of a burnout, I think, and it hurt it a bit. So it's going to come here at number 3. Now this one was tough because both of these albums I like a lot. The Sabbath album had suffered some burnout, but has made a little bit of a comeback over the last few years. The side 1 is unrelenting, just a fantastic side of an album, even with Paranoid in there. Side 2, maybe like I said, not as good, and that maybe hurt it and made it why it ended up in 2nd place here by a hair though. There's not much difference between the two. I just decided that there was more stuff on the other album that just really resonates better with me than the stuff that still resonates with me on this album. I think it's just a little bit better, but not much. I know many people will not believe that I would choose this as my 2nd, but it's my number 2 here. Number 1 is still going to be Ace Frehley. Didn't win it by much, though. It's kind of surprised me. I thought it would blow these 3 albums away, and it really didn't. Maybe it is suffering a little bit of burnout now over the years, but it still has half a dozen of the tracks on here are still top-notch to me. There's a little bit of weakness between 1 or 2 of the other tracks that maybe would drag it down a bit, but not enough to finish anything but first here. So that's my ranking. Ace Frehley, number 1, his solo album. Black Sabbath's Paranoid, number 2. The Who's Live at Leeds, number 3. And last and least, of course, here, Neil Young's Freedom. But all of them are masterpiece albums. They all have great scores for this. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of I guess it's a battle of my masterpiece albums. So please hit the like and subscribe. If you want to rank these how you want to rank them, you can do that in the ranking below. If you've got any comments or anything to say about anything I've said, you can do that as well. I can take it, mostly. Anyways, I hope to see you all throughout the week. Take care and have a good one. Goodbye.